In a quiet, picturesque village surrounded by rolling hills and fertile fields, life moved at a gentle pace. The air was always filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers and the sound of birds chirping in harmony. This serene setting was home to two brothers, Ahmed and Yusuf, who were well known not just for their hard work but also for their deep devotion to Islam. Their faith wasn't something they kept hidden. It was woven into every aspect of their daily lives, from how they treated others to how they approached challenges. Ahmed, the elder brother, had a calm demeanor that matched his thoughtful nature. He was known as a man of few words, but when he spoke, people listened because his advice always carried wisdom. Yusuf, on the other hand, was more outgoing and energetic. His laughter could light up even the gloomiest days, and he had a knack for making everyone around him feel valued. Despite their different personalities, the bond between the two brothers was unshakable. They shared everything: meals at the table, earnings from their farm, and even dreams about building a better future for their families. Their modest house stood near the edge of the village, overlooking vast fields where they grew wheat, barley, and vegetables. Every morning before the sun rose high in the sky, Ahmed and Yusuf would head out together to tend to their crops. They worked side by side, exchanging stories and discussing plans for improving their land. Sometimes they'd pause under the shade of an old oak tree, sipping cool water and reflecting on verses from the Quran. These moments weren't just breaks from labor. They were opportunities to strengthen their connection with Allah and each other. The villagers admired the brothers deeply. Not only did they provide fresh produce to the market, but they also helped neighbors in need without expecting anything in return. If someone fell sick or faced financial hardship, Ahmed and Yusuf were among the first to step forward with support. People often remarked that their generosity stemmed from their strong faith. They're living examples of what it means to be good Muslims, one elderly villager once said during Friday prayers. However, beneath this idyllic surface lay a long-forgotten issue, a dispute over a small piece of land that had been passed down through generations. Decades ago, their grandfather had divided the property between his two sons, intending for them to share its bounty equally. But unclear boundaries led to confusion, and while their father tried to resolve the matter peacefully, he eventually left it unresolved, hoping time would heal any potential rifts. For years, neither Ahmed nor Yusuf paid much attention to the disagreement. The land in question wasn't particularly valuable. It was rocky and unsuitable for farming, but it held sentimental significance. One day, however, whispers began to circulate among the villagers. Someone mentioned hearing Ahmed talk about digging a well on the disputed land. Another claimed Yusuf had expressed frustration over the idea, arguing that the area rightfully belonged to him. At first, these rumors seemed harmless, like ripples in a pond that would soon fade away. But as days turned into weeks, tensions started simmering below the surface. What began as casual comments grew into heated discussions whenever the brothers crossed paths. It all came to a head during a community gathering. The villagers had assembled to celebrate Eid, sharing food and joy after months of fasting. As families exchanged greetings and children played happily, Ahmed brought up the topic of the well he wanted to build. He explained that it would benefit not only his family but also neighboring farmers who struggled during dry seasons. Yusuf interrupted mid-sentence, his voice sharp and uncharacteristically loud. "That land is mine," he declared, drawing stares from everyone present. The festive atmosphere suddenly shifted, replaced by awkward silence. Ahmed, taken aback by his brother's outburst, responded firmly. "I've checked the records, Yusuf. Grandfather intended for us to share it equally. Why are you making such a fuss now?" The argument escalated quickly, with both men raising their voices and refusing to back down. Their wives and children looked on helplessly, unsure how to intervene. Even the village elders, respected figures known for resolving conflicts, couldn't calm the situation. By the end of the evening, the celebration had lost its warmth, overshadowed by the bitter exchange between the brothers. As news of the quarrel spread, the village buzzed with gossip. Some sided with Ahmed, believing his intentions were noble. Others supported Yusuf, thinking he was merely defending what was rightfully his. Friends and relatives tried to mediate, urging the brothers to find common ground. But pride and stubbornness took hold, turning what should have been a minor disagreement into a full-blown feud. Ahmed stopped visiting Yusuf's home, and Yusuf avoided crossing paths with his brother. The once close siblings became strangers, their bond fractured by anger and misunderstanding. Despite the growing divide, there was still hope lingering in the hearts of those who cared about them. Especially Fatima, their aging mother, whose prayers echoed through the nights. She watched her sons drift apart with a heavy heart, knowing that if left unchecked, this conflict could tear their family apart forever. Yet she refused to give up. With unwavering faith, she continued to pray for guidance, trusting that Allah would show her sons the path to reconciliation. Little did anyone know, this prayer would set into motion events that would leave the entire village stunned and forever changed. As the days passed, the once peaceful village began to feel the weight of the growing tension between Ahmed and Yusuf. What had started as a minor disagreement over a patch of land soon spiraled into something far more damaging. The brothers, who were once inseparable, now avoided each other at all costs. Their interactions, if they could even be called that, were limited to terse exchanges filled with frustration and resentment. The warmth that used to define their relationship was replaced by icy silence, leaving a void that no one in the village knew how to fill. Ahmed, still determined to build the well, became increasingly stubborn about his plans. He believed it was not just for his benefit but for the entire community. "This isn't about greed," he would tell anyone who questioned him. "It's about helping others. The water from this well could save crops during droughts and provide clean drinking water for families." His intentions seemed noble, and many villagers agreed with him. But his refusal to compromise on the location of the well only fueled Yusuf's anger. Yusuf, on the other hand, felt deeply wronged. To him, the land in question wasn't just a piece of earth, it represented fairness and justice. "If we let this slide, what message does it send?" he argued passionately. "What if others start claiming what isn't theirs? Where does it end?" For Yusuf, standing his ground wasn't just about pride, it was about principle. He couldn't bear the thought of giving in, fearing it might set a dangerous precedent. The more he thought about it, the more convinced he became that Ahmed was being unreasonable. The rift between them didn't stay confined to private arguments. It spilled into public spaces, turning gatherings that were once joyful into uncomfortable confrontations. During Friday prayers at the mosque, Ahmed and Yusuf sat on opposite sides of the hall, deliberately avoiding eye contact. Even the imam noticed the change. In one sermon, he spoke about unity and forgiveness, quoting verses from the Quran. "And hold firmly to the rope of Allah altogether, and do not become divided." Though his words weren't directed specifically at the brothers, everyone understood the underlying message. Yet neither Ahmed nor Yusuf softened their stance. Instead, they dug their heels in deeper, each convinced they were right. Their wives, Amina and Fatima, bore the brunt of the escalating feud. Once close friends who shared meals and laughter, they now found themselves caught in the crossfire. Amina pleaded with Ahmed to reconsider, reminding him of the bond he shared with Yusuf. "You're letting this destroy everything you've built together," she said one evening, her voice trembling. "Is a well worth losing your brother over?" Ahmed sighed heavily but remained resolute. "It's not about the well," he replied. "It's about doing what's fair for everyone." Fatima faced similar challenges with Yusuf. She tried, reasoning with him, pointing out that their family's reputation was suffering because of the quarrel. "People are talking, Yusuf," she warned gently. "They see us as role models. How can we teach our children about kindness and patience when we can't even resolve our own differences?" But Yusuf dismissed her concerns, insisting that backing down would make him look weak. "Sometimes standing up for what's right means facing criticism," he told her firmly. "I won't apologize for defending my rights." The divide extended beyond their immediate families. Their children, cousins who had grown up playing together, now hesitated to interact. When they did meet, the atmosphere was awkward, tinged with uncertainty. Neighbors began taking sides, some sympathizing with Ahmed's vision of community service, while others supported Yusuf's stand against injustice. Conversations around dinner tables revolved around the dispute, with opinions clashing and tempers flaring. The village, which had always prided itself on harmony, now felt fractured. Even the elders, respected figures known for their wisdom, struggled to mediate. They called several meetings, inviting both brothers to sit down and discuss their grievances. At first, Ahmed and Yusuf agreed to attend, hopeful that a solution might emerge. But these discussions quickly devolved into heated arguments, with each man reiterating his position without listening to the other. Frustrated, the elders eventually gave up, lamenting that the brothers' stubbornness was impossible to penetrate. "We've done all we can," one elder admitted sadly. "It's in Allah's hands now." Despite the mounting pressure, neither Ahmed nor Yusuf showed any signs of relenting. Each day brought new reasons to justify their actions. Ahmed focused on the practical benefits of the well, imagining the smiles of grateful villagers once it was completed. He envisioned himself as a hero, someone whose efforts would leave a lasting legacy. Meanwhile, Yusuf clung to his sense of righteousness, replaying scenarios in his mind where he stood firm against injustice. He saw himself as a defender of truth, protecting not just his own interests but the integrity of the entire family. Ironically, both men believed they were acting according to Islamic principles. Ahmed cited verses about charity and serving humanity, convinced that building the well aligned with his faith. Yusuf countered with teachings about fairness and accountability, arguing that compromising on his rights would go against the values he held dear. Both interpretations had merit, yet neither brother could see past their own perspective. Their inability to find common ground highlighted a painful irony. Two devout Muslims, guided by the same holy book, had allowed worldly matters to drive them apart. As weeks turned into months, the emotional toll became evident. Ahmed grew quieter, retreating into himself whenever the topic came up. His usual calm demeanor gave way to frustration, and he often snapped at those closest to him. Yusuf, too, seemed burdened by the conflict. His once infectious laughter became rare, replaced by a constant furrow of worry on his brow. Friends noticed the change in them and tried offering support, but their attempts fell flat. The brothers were consumed by their battle, blind to the damage it was causing. Amidst the chaos, there was one person who refused to give up hope: their mother, Fatima. Watching her sons drift further apart broke her heart, but she refused to surrender to despair. Every night after finishing her household chores, she would retreat to a quiet corner of the house and pray fervently. Her prayers were heartfelt, filled with pleas for guidance and reconciliation. "O Allah," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You know the truth of this matter better than anyone. Please open their hearts and show them the way back to each other." She prayed not just for her sons but for the entire village, hoping that peace would prevail. Fatima's unwavering faith became a beacon of hope in an otherwise dark time. Villagers admired her resilience and often joined her in prayer, believing that divine intervention might be the only solution. While Ahmed and Yusuf remained locked in their standoff, those around them continued to hold on to the belief that things would eventually improve. After all, life has a way of teaching lessons when we least expect them, and sometimes those lessons come in ways that leave us stunned. Fatima, the mother of Ahmed and Yusuf, was a woman whose life had been shaped by hardship and faith. She had raised her sons with love, patience, and an unwavering commitment to instilling in them the values of Islam. Now, as she watched her family unravel over a piece of land, her heart ached in ways words could never fully capture. Her days were filled with worry, yet her nights were spent pouring her soul into prayer, seeking Allah's mercy and guidance. To her, this conflict wasn't just about two stubborn brothers. It was about preserving the bond that held their family together. Every morning, Fatima would wake up before dawn, long before the first light kissed the horizon. She began her day with Fajr prayers, kneeling on the worn prayer mat that had been passed down through generations. As she recited verses from the Quran, her voice trembled with emotion. The words felt heavier now, carrying the weight of her hopes and fears. After finishing her prayers, she would sit quietly for a few moments, gazing out at the fields where her sons once worked side by side. Those fields, once symbols of unity and hard work, now stood as reminders of division and pain. Fatima decided it was time to act. She couldn't stand idly by while her family fell apart. Gathering her courage, she approached Ahmed one evening after he returned from the fields. His face was lined with exhaustion, but his eyes still carried the fire of determination. "Ahmed," she began softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Can we talk?" He hesitated for a moment, then nodded and followed her inside. Seated across from him at the low wooden table, Fatima spoke gently but firmly. "My son," she said, "I know, you believe building the well is the right thing to do, and perhaps it is, but at what cost? You're losing your brother, your best friend, your partner in life. Is this truly worth it?" Ahmed looked away, his jaw tightening. She continued, "Do you remember the stories I told you about Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him? How he forgave those who wronged him even when it was hardest. Forgiveness doesn't make you weak. It makes you strong." Ahmed listened silently, his hands clenched into fists. He wanted to argue, to explain why he couldn't back down, but something in his mother's tone stopped him. It wasn't anger or accusation. It was pure love, mixed with sorrow. "Think about Yusuf," she urged. "He's not just your brother. He's part of your soul. What will happen if this feud continues? Will you regret it later when it's too late?" The next day, Fatima visited Yusuf. Her younger son greeted her warmly, offering her tea and a seat under the shade of a tree. But Fatima didn't come for pleasantries. "Yusuf," she said, her voice steady but tinged with sadness, "I need you to hear me out." He nodded, sensing the seriousness of her tone. "Your father and I taught you to stand up for justice," she began. "And I'm proud of how fiercely you defend what you believe is right. But tell me this. Does standing your ground mean sacrificing your relationship with Ahmed? Does holding on to this anger bring you peace?" Yusuf opened his mouth to respond, but she raised a hand to silence him. "Listen carefully, my child. In the Quran, Allah says, 'And hasten to forgiveness from your Lord, and a garden as wide as the heavens and earth, prepared for the righteous.' Do you want to enter paradise burdened by bitterness or free of it?" Yusuf stared at the ground, his chest tightening. He had always prided himself on being principled, but his mother's words struck a chord deep within him. Was he clinging to this argument because it was truly about justice, or because his pride wouldn't let him yield? The thought unsettled him, but he pushed it aside, unwilling to confront it fully. Despite her efforts, Fatima saw little change in her son's behavior. They remained distant, avoiding each other whenever possible. Yet she refused to give up. Every evening, after completing her household chores, she would walk to the mosque and join the women in congregational prayer. There, surrounded by others who shared her faith, she found solace. Together, they prayed for reconciliation, not just for Ahmed and Yusuf, but for the entire village. One night, unable to sleep, Fatima sat alone in the dim glow of a lantern. She opened her worn copy of the Quran and began reading aloud, her voice soft but filled with conviction. She lingered on Surah Al-Hujurat, which emphasized resolving disputes with kindness and fairness. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she read the verse. "If two parties among the believers fall into a quarrel, make peace between them. But if one of them transgresses beyond bounds against the other, then fight against the one that transgresses until it complies with the command of Allah." Her reflection turned inward. Who was truly transgressing in this situation? Was it Ahmed for insisting on building the well, or Yusuf for refusing to compromise? Perhaps, she realized, it was both of them, and neither of them. They were caught in a cycle of misunderstanding, blinded by their egos and emotions. Only Allah could see the full picture, and only He could guide them toward resolution. The next morning, Fatima made a decision. She invited both Ahmed and Yusuf to meet her at the mosque after Asr prayers. When they arrived, hesitant and uncomfortable in each other's presence, she gestured for them to sit beside her. The courtyard was quiet, save for the rustling leaves overhead and the distant hum of birdsong. For a moment, no one spoke. Finally, Fatima broke the silence. "My dear sons," she said, her voice trembling with emotion, "I've called you here today because I can't bear to see you like this anymore. Look at yourselves, two brothers, born of the same womb, raised under the same roof, guided by the same teachings. And yet here you are, letting anger and pride destroy everything we've built together." She paused, taking a deep breath. "Allah has given us so much. Our health, our families, our faith. But none of these blessings matter if we lose sight of what truly counts: love, forgiveness, and unity. Do you think Allah created us to fight over rocks and dirt? No. He created us to care for one another, to lift each other up, to be examples of His mercy." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Ahmed shifted uncomfortably, while Yusuf stared at the ground, his expression unreadable. Fatima reached out and placed a hand on each of their shoulders. "I'm not asking either of you to admit defeat. I'm asking you to rise above this. Be the men I know you are, the men who put their faith above all else. If building the well is important to you, Ahmed, find a way to do it without hurting your brother. And if protecting your rights matters to you, Yusuf, find a way to express that without breaking ties." For a brief moment, it seemed as though her plea might break through. Ahmed glanced at Yusuf, and for the first time in months, their eyes met. But just as quickly, the connection faded, replaced by the familiar walls of resentment. They muttered polite goodbyes and left the mosque separately, leaving Fatima sitting alone in the courtyard. Though her attempt to mediate had failed, Fatima's resolve only grew stronger. She knew that sometimes lessons take time to sink in. Sometimes people need to hit rock bottom before they're ready to climb back up. So she continued praying, trusting that Allah would guide her sons in His own time. And though the road ahead seemed uncertain, she held on to hope that one day Ahmed and Yusuf would remember the bond they once cherished, and the wounds of their feud would heal. Months passed, and the tension between Ahmed and Yusuf showed no signs of easing. The village, once vibrant with laughter and camaraderie, now carried an air of unease. Conversations were laced with caution, as if everyone feared reigniting the feud that had consumed the brothers. Yet life went on. Crops grew, children played, and prayers echoed through the mosque. But beneath the surface, the weight of unresolved conflict lingered, casting a shadow over the community. Fatima continued her tireless efforts to mend the rift, but her pleas seemed to fall on deaf ears. Ahmed remained steadfast in his determination to build the well, convinced it was the right thing to do for the greater good. Yusuf, equally resolute, refused to budge, seeing any compromise as a betrayal of his principles. Their stubbornness left little room for negotiation, and the chasm between them widened with each passing day. Then, one fateful morning, everything changed. Yusuf woke up feeling unusually tired. His body ached and a dull headache throbbed behind his temples. At first, he dismissed it as fatigue from working long hours in the fields. He pushed through the discomfort, tending to his chores and caring for his family. But by midday, the symptoms worsened. A fever swept over him, leaving him weak and disoriented. Concerned, Fatima rushed to his side, placing a cool cloth on his forehead and urging him to rest. "I'll be fine, Mother," Yusuf insisted weakly, though his voice betrayed his exhaustion. "It's probably just the heat." But the fever didn't subside. By evening, Yusuf's condition had deteriorated alarmingly. His breathing became labored and his skin was clammy to the touch. Fatima sent word to Ahmed, desperate for help. Despite their strained relationship, Ahmed arrived promptly, his face etched with worry. For a moment, the years of bitterness melted away as they focused on saving their brother. The village doctor examined Yusuf and shook his head gravely. "This is more than exhaustion or heat stroke," he said. "It could be an infection, or worse. We need to act quickly." Yusuf was moved to a makeshift bed near the window, where fresh air might ease his suffering. Neighbors gathered outside, whispering prayers and offering assistance. Fatima stayed by his side, holding his hand and reciting verses from the Quran. Ahmed paced nervously, torn between guilt and fear. He couldn't shake the thought that perhaps this tragedy was a consequence of their prolonged feud, a punishment for allowing worldly matters to overshadow their bond. Throughout the night, Yusuf drifted in and out of consciousness. When he was awake, his words were fragmented, often incoherent. At one point, he looked up at Ahmed and muttered, "Brother, forgive me." Ahmed froze, tears welling in his eyes. He knelt beside Yusuf, gripping his hand tightly. "There's nothing to forgive," he choked out. "Just get better. Please." But Yusuf's strength was fading. By dawn, his breathing slowed to shallow gasps, and his pulse grew faint. Fatima clung to him, sobbing uncontrollably, while Ahmed stood frozen, unable to process the reality unfolding before him. Moments later, Yusuf took his final breath, leaving behind a silence so profound, it felt like the entire village had stopped breathing. The news of Yusuf's death spread quickly, sending shockwaves through the community. People streamed into the house to pay their respects, their faces etched with grief. The man who had always been the life of every gathering, whose laughter could brighten even the darkest days, was gone. It was unimaginable. Ahmed sat alone in a corner, his head buried in his hands. Waves of guilt crashed over him, threatening to drown him. He replayed their last conversation in his mind, the harsh words, the stubborn refusals, the missed opportunities to reconcile. How could he have let things go so far? Why hadn't he reached out sooner? These questions haunted him, gnawing at his soul. Fatima, too, was overwhelmed with sorrow, but she found solace in her faith. In the depths of her pain, she reminded herself of Allah's wisdom. "To Allah we belong, and to Him we shall return," she whispered repeatedly, clinging to the belief that Yusuf's suffering was now over and that he had returned to his Creator. Still, the loss of her son left a void that nothing could fill. Preparations for the funeral began immediately. Villagers worked together to wash and shroud Yusuf's body according to Islamic tradition. As they wrapped him in white cloth, many reflected on the fragility of life and the importance of resolving conflicts before it's too late. The Imam delivered a heartfelt sermon during the janazah prayer, reminding everyone of the fleeting nature of this world and the eternal consequences of our actions. "Let Yusuf's passing be a lesson to us all," he said solemnly. "We must prioritize love, forgiveness, and unity over pride and anger. Tomorrow is never guaranteed, and today may be our last chance to make amends." As the procession made its way to the graveyard, Ahmed walked alongside the coffin, his steps heavy with regret. Each step felt like a reminder of the bond he had lost and the role he had played in severing it. When they reached the gravesite, Ahmed helped lower Yusuf's body into the earth, his hands trembling as he placed the soil back over him. Tears streamed down his face as he whispered, "Forgive me, my brother. I failed you." The burial marked the beginning of a new chapter, not just for Ahmed but for the entire village. Yusuf's death served as a wake-up call, forcing everyone to confront the consequences of unresolved disputes. Neighbors who had taken sides in the feud now realized how foolish they had been. Friends who had avoided Ahmed and Yusuf out of discomfort vowed to approach conflicts differently in the future. Even the elders who had given up hope of mediating the dispute acknowledged that they should have tried harder. For Ahmed, the days following Yusuf's funeral were filled with reflection and remorse. He spent hours sitting by Yusuf's grave, speaking to him as if he could still hear. "I'm sorry, Yusuf," he said one afternoon, his voice breaking. "I let my pride blind me. I cared more about proving I was right than preserving what truly mattered, our bond. I promise to honor your memory by making things right." Determined to keep his word, Ahmed reached out to Yusuf's family. He visited Fatima regularly, helping her with household chores and ensuring she had everything she needed. To his surprise, she welcomed him warmly, grateful for his presence. "Your brother loved you deeply," she told him one evening. "He forgave you long before he passed. Now it's your turn to forgive yourself." Ahmed also began repairing relationships within the community. He apologized to those he had hurt during the feud and encouraged others to do the same. Slowly, but surely, the village began to heal. Conversations became lighter, smiles returned to faces, and the sense of unity that had once defined the community started to re-emerge. Yet despite these efforts, Ahmed knew there was more he could do to honor Yusuf's memory. One night, as he lay awake thinking about his brother, an idea formed in his mind. It was bold, perhaps even symbolic, but it felt like the right thing to do. With renewed purpose, Ahmed resolved to take action, not just for himself, but for the legacy of the bond he had shared with Yusuf. What Ahmed decided to do next would leave the entire village stunned and forever change the way they viewed forgiveness, redemption, and the power of faith. The night after Yusuf's burial, Ahmed lay awake on his mat, staring at the ceiling. The house was silent except for the faint rustling of leaves outside his window, carried by a gentle breeze. Sleep eluded him as it had every night since Yusuf's passing. His mind was a whirlwind of emotions, guilt, regret, and an overwhelming sense of loss. But tonight, something felt different. Tonight, amidst the chaos in his heart, there was clarity. Ahmed closed his eyes and tried to recall the last time he and Yusuf had truly laughed together. He remembered their childhood days, running through the fields, chasing fireflies under the moonlight. He remembered how they would sit beneath the old oak tree, sharing stories about their dreams for the future. Back then, nothing could come between them. Not disagreements, not hardships, not even the occasional scolding from their mother. Their bond had been unbreakable, forged in love and strengthened by shared experiences. But somewhere along the way, that bond had weakened. Pride and stubbornness had crept in, poisoning their relationship until it shattered completely. Now, lying alone in the darkness, Ahmed realized just how much he had taken his brother for granted. Yusuf wasn't just a sibling. He was a part of Ahmed's soul. Losing him had left a gaping hole that no amount of work or wealth could ever fill. Exhaustion finally overtook him, Ahmed drifted into a deep sleep. And then the dream began. In the dream, Ahmed found himself standing in a vast open field bathed in soft golden light. The air was warm and fragrant, carrying the scent of blooming flowers. It was peaceful here, almost otherworldly. As he looked around, he saw a figure approaching him, a man dressed in simple white robes, smiling warmly. Ahmed's breath caught in his throat when he recognized the face. It was Yusuf. "Brother," Yusuf said, his voice calm and filled with kindness. "It's good to see you." Ahmed froze, unsure if this was real or just another cruel trick of his grieving mind. "Yusuf," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Is that really you?" "It's me," Yusuf replied, stepping closer. His presence radiated peace, unlike anything Ahmed had ever felt before. "I've missed you, Ahmed." Tears streamed down Ahmed's face as he reached out hesitantly, afraid the moment might vanish like mist in the morning sun. But when his hand touched Yusuf's shoulder, it was solid, real. Overcome with emotion, Ahmed pulled his brother into a tight embrace, sobbing uncontrollably. "I'm so sorry, Yusuf," he choked out. "I failed you. I let my pride destroy everything we had." Yusuf gently patted his back, offering comfort. "Shh, brother. There's no need for apologies here. You carried your burdens as best you could, and now it's time to let them go." Ahmed pulled away slightly, wiping his tears. "But how can I? I let our argument tear us apart. I never got the chance to make things right." Yusuf smiled softly, his eyes filled with understanding. "We all make mistakes, Ahmed. What matters is what we do next. Remember our faith. Allah forgives those who seek forgiveness sincerely, and so must we forgive ourselves and each other." Ahmed nodded, though his heart still ached. "But without you here, I feel lost. How will I move forward?" Yusuf gestured toward a distant hill, where two graves stood side by side. Ahmed squinted, confused. One grave looked familiar. It was where Yusuf had been buried. But the second grave was unfamiliar, freshly dug with no marker yet. "That's where I want to rest," Yusuf explained, pointing to the empty grave. "Next to you, brother. Let us be reunited, not just in spirit, but in this life and the hereafter. Build your resting place beside mine, so we can share eternity as we once shared our lives." Ahmed stared at the graves, overwhelmed by the symbolism. To build a grave for himself meant accepting mortality, embracing humility, and letting go of the pride that had driven him and Yusuf apart. It also meant honoring their bond in the most profound way possible, by ensuring they remained together, even in death. "I'll do it," Ahmed promised, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. "I'll honor your wish, Yusuf. We'll be brothers forever." Yusuf's smile widened, and for a moment Ahmed thought he saw tears glistening in his brother's eyes. "Thank you, Ahmed. This is what I prayed for, to leave behind a legacy of unity and love. You have the power to heal our family and inspire others. Don't waste it." Before Ahmed could respond, the scene began to fade. The golden light dimmed, and Yusuf's figure grew translucent. "Wait!" Ahmed called out, reaching for him. But Yusuf simply waved and whispered, "Trust in Allah, my brother. He will guide you." And then Ahmed woke up. The room was dark, the silence broken only by the rhythmic ticking of a clock. For a moment Ahmed sat still, trying to process what had happened. Had it been a dream, or something more? The vividness of the encounter left him certain of one thing. Yusuf's message was real. Whether sent by Allah or born from his own subconscious, it was a call to action, one he couldn't ignore. Determined to honor his brother's request, Ahmed rose from his bed and stepped outside into the cool night air. The stars above twinkled, brightly as if watching over him. He walked to the edge of the property where the disputed land lay untouched. Standing there, he envisioned the graveside Yusuf had shown him. The two plots side by side, symbols of reconciliation and eternal unity. Over the next few days, Ahmed made plans. He approached the village elders, explaining his intention to purchase the adjacent plot of land and construct a resting place for himself next to Yusuf's grave. At first, the elders were surprised, even skeptical. Building one's own grave while still alive was unusual, to say the least. But when Ahmed shared the details of his dream, they listened intently, moved by the sincerity in his voice. "This isn't just about me," Ahmed told them. "It's about healing our family and reminding everyone of the importance of forgiveness. My brother and I let worldly matters tear us apart. I don't want anyone else to make the same mistake." The elders agreed to support his decision, recognizing its deeper significance. Word of Ahmed's plan spread quickly through the village, sparking curiosity and admiration. Some villagers questioned whether such an act was permissible in Islam, prompting the imam to address the topic during Friday prayers. Drawing upon Quranic teachings and examples from the Prophet Muhammad's life, he reassured everyone that Ahmed's intentions aligned with Islamic values of humility, forgiveness, and preparation for the afterlife. Building a grave for oneself is not forbidden if done with pure intentions, the imam explained. What matters is the state of our hearts when we meet Allah. If Ahmed seeks to mend his relationship with his brother and set an example for us all, then surely this act carries great merit. With the community's blessing, Ahmed hired local builders to construct the gravesite. He insisted on simplicity, wanting the design to reflect humility rather than extravagance. Two modest stone slabs were placed side by side, both facing the Qibla. Around them, he planted flowers and shrubs, creating a serene space that invited reflection and prayer. As the work progressed, villagers visited the site, marveling at its beauty and symbolism. Children played quietly nearby, and elders sat on benches, sharing stories of Ahmed and Yusuf's childhood. The atmosphere was one of peace and unity, a stark contrast to the tension that had gripped the village just months earlier. For Ahmed, the process of building the graveside became a form of therapy. Each day he spent hours supervising the construction, pouring his heart into every detail. When the builders finished, he knelt beside Yusuf's grave, whispering a prayer of gratitude. "I've kept my promise, brother," he said softly. "We'll be together again, just as we always should have been." Though the physical monument was complete, Ahmed knew the true work lay ahead. He resolved to live the remainder of his life with purpose, guided by the lessons he had learned. Forgiveness, humility, and love would be his guiding principles, not just for himself, but for everyone fortunate enough to cross his path. Little did Ahmed realize, however, that his actions would ripple far beyond the village, inspiring countless others to reflect on their own relationships and priorities. His story, a tale of redemption, faith, and eternal brotherhood, would soon become legend, leaving an indelible mark on all who heard it.